As you arrive into Verdun, you enter the city via the Voie Sacrée, which is just below me there now. This was the route from Bar-le-Duc up into Verdun itself, where during the battle, this was the vital lines of communication that brought supplies, logistics, men, ammunition, everything up to the frontline area. It was the vital lifeline, if you like, that kept the poilus, the bonhommes, the French soldiers, kept them in the front line, enabled them to make their stand at Verdun, and was a key to the success of that battle for the French in 1916. And this memorial here above the Voie Sacrée remembers that important route for those supplies. Hundreds of lorries, night and day, the Petit Mersien railway running alongside with supplies too. This incredible logistics exercise that enabled a vast army like the French army had in 1916 to be kept in the field. And it also, the kind of movement of men and traffic up that road created this idea of Verdun being this mincing machine of men, columns going up, men ready for battle, and regiments being ground down in that mill on the Meuse above Verdun and coming back a mere shadow of themselves. It's a misty morning as we approach Verdun, and standing at the Voie Sacrée Memorial, I'm looking down onto the Voie Sacrée itself, that road that took the supplies from behind the French lines at Bar-le-Duc up towards the forward zone of the battlefield. And this is one of those places where World War I meets World War II, because just beyond it, and I can see cars coming down that now, is the Voie de la Liberté, the Liberty Way, the route of the American liberation of France in 1944, starting from the D-Day beaches at Utah Beach, St. Mary-Glees, right up through Normandy and Paris, and into the Meuse and beyond, eventually to Lorraine and up towards Bastogne, where the Voie de la Liberté ends. So in the Great War, this is where France stood against the might of Imperial Germany in 1916, where American troops served in the latter stages of the Meuse-Argonne offensive in 1918, and where a generation later GIs under the command of General Patton, who'd served close to here in the Great War himself, fought their way up through France and liberated this region along the Liberty Way. And just as the Voie Sacrée is marked each kilometre with a Voie Sacrée marker, the Liberty Way is marked as well by these dome monuments that mark that route of liberty from World War II. Just completing our look at the Voie Sacrée, we're coming to the busy heart of Verdun, close to the railway station, and this is where the Voie Sacrée ended. And now there's a memorial to it, to the point where the supplies were brought up by truck and the Petit Mersien railway, and the beating heart of the Verdun logistics arrangements enabled all those supplies of shells and equipment and food and everything else to go up to the frontline area. After the Great War, scattered across those battlefields of that conflict were the graves of many, many unidentified French soldiers. And on top of that, there were the missing men whose remains had never been found. And as a nation, France wanted to remember their dead and perhaps represent them through one soldier, an unknown warrior, to be buried underneath the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. And here at Verdun, at the Citadel, the former headquarters of the forces here at Verdun, a young veteran of the 132nd Regiment of Infantry, Auguste Tain, was selected. He was one of the youngest soldiers of his regiment and had fought here at Verdun. He was given the task of choosing the coffin of an unidentified soldier to be placed in that honoured grave. Now, he was nervous when that selection process was on, and he added together the numbers of his regiment, 1, 3, 2, to make 6, and he chose the 6th coffin out of 8 that was laid before him in the Citadel. Presiding over it was the Minister of War, André Maginot, who had lost a leg at Verdun in 1916, and would go on to preside over the famous Maginot Line of the 1930s and the next great conflict. But it was here at Verdun that that unknown warrior was chosen. Which battlefront he came from, we'll never know, but he came to symbolise France's dead. 1.4 million dead in the Great War. But unusually, the French then placed the soldiers who were not selected for that special grave into a memorial and grave site in the centre of the La Pavée cemetery at Verdun, where I am now. And they're placed around a central cross, and the graves are marked for all time as those men who could have been France's unknown soldier, France's unknown warrior. All over the Verdun battlefield are the signposts to the tragedy of 1916 and the losses of what to France and Germany might have felt like an entire generation of men. And here at Douaumont, at the French National Cemetery, I'm walking amongst more than 16,000 crosses commemorating French soldiers, and amongst them Muslim graves as well, men from France's colonies who fought here as part of the colonial corps in 1916. But ahead of me is the ossuary, the massive memorial beneath which are the bones of more than 120,000 soldiers who fell at Verdun. Not just French, not just colonial soldiers from Morocco or Senegal or so many other places that were part of France's great empire, but Germans and possibly Americans from the battlefields of 1918 too. This is a place of sacrifice, and at its heart is Douaumont, a warning to future generations, and the bones of the dead that lay in sections of the memorial exposed with glass panels so you can look in and see the piles of rib cages and pelvises and skulls looking at you. Here is that warning. This is what happens if Europe goes to war. And it's especially poignant, I guess, standing here today thinking that on the other side of Europe right now, Europe is at war once more. But Douaumont, this ossuary and the cemetery here, stands for the thousands of poilus that came into the mincing machine of Verdun in 1916. Not everyone died, of course. Most men survived. But the legacy of Verdun for them lived with those soldiers, those veterans, for the remainder of their lives. Verdun forever, that byword for France's Great War.